There is a quiet pattern that has taken down almost every great empire in history, not in a blaze of glory on the battlefield, but slowly through its own money. Rome, Spain, Britain, each thought they were different. Each believed the rules of economics no longer applied to them. They were wrong. And today, in the 21st century, the United States is walking the same road, step by step. To see how this works, we start with Rome. At its height, Rome ruled tens of millions of people across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Its roads stitched the empire together. Its legions were feared everywhere, and its silver coin, the denarius, was trusted from Britain to Egypt. When you held a denarius, you knew it contained real silver, value you could weigh. That trust was Rome's superpower. It allowed the state to tax, to trade, to pay its soldiers, and to build aqueducts, ports, and fortresses. But empire is expensive. Every new frontier needed garrisons, food, roads, administration. Over time, Rome's promises outgrew its income.
So emperors reached for the easiest, most dangerous tool in history. They cheated the money. Instead of raising unpopular taxes or cutting spending, they quietly reduced the silver content in the coins. Under Nero, the denarius went from almost pure silver to noticeably less. The metal still shone, the emperor's face still looked proud, but inside the coin was weaker. By the 3rd century, that trick had become addiction. Each emperor shaved off a little more silver to pay for civil wars, border crises, and palaces. A coin that had once been almost pure silver was mostly cheap metal with a thin coating. On paper, soldiers' pay looked the same. In reality, their money bought less every year. Then the dam broke. Prices exploded. What had cost one coin now cost dozens. Farmers stopped accepting the state's money and demanded payment in goods or gold. Soldiers threatened mutiny unless they were paid in something real. Tax collectors couldn't collect because nobody trusted the coins.
Rome's economy jammed like a seized engine. By the late 4th and early 5th century, the Western Empire was a shadow of what it had been. Roads were unrepaired, frontier forts abandoned, officials unpaid. When Germanic tribes finally crossed into imperial territory, they weren't facing the Rome of Caesar and Augustus. They were facing a state that could no longer afford to feed, clothe, and pay a professional army. The currency died first. The empire followed. Rome taught the world a brutal lesson. If you destroy trust in money, you eventually destroy everything that money supports. Yet, future empires forgot that warning. 1,000 years later, another superpower would rise, this time fueled not by silver already in the ground, but by silver ripped from the other side of the world. Spain believed that endless treasure meant endless power. Instead, it discovered that even mountains of precious metal cannot save you from bad decisions with debt, spending, and currency. In chasing glory, its rulers quietly sawed through the foundations holding everything up. That same temptation waited for every empire that came after it. Spain enters the story in the 1500s, convinced it had found a cheat code to empire. Conquistadors crushed the Aztec and Inca empires, and from the mountains of the Americas, Spain began shipping home something Rome could only dream of: an ocean of silver. Potosi's Cerro Rico became a mountain of money, and the Spanish silver dollar spread across oceans as a truly global currency. For a while, it looked like effortless wealth. Treasure fleets arrived, Spain fought wars on multiple fronts, and assumed the mines would pay for everything.
But when you flood the world with money faster than you create real goods and services, prices rise. What had cost one coin a century earlier cost several by 1600. The silver was still pure, but its buying power shrank with every shipment. Instead of building strong industries at home, Spain lived off extraction. Silver flowed in and then straight back out to pay for weapons, luxuries, and interest on growing debts. When that wasn't enough, the crown borrowed more. King Philip II defaulted again and again. Each default shattered trust and pushed interest rates higher.
Desperate, the government reached for a familiar trick: tampering with the coinage. New coins contained less silver or were mixed with cheaper metals that were supposed to be treated as valuable. People noticed. Markets always notice. Inflation accelerated, trade partners lost faith, and the empire that had once drowned in silver found itself starved of real credit. By the 17th century, Spain was sliding into long-term decline. Then came Britain, the empire of steam and global trade. For 2 centuries, the British pound sterling was the backbone of world commerce. It was anchored to gold, and governments were willing to hold it because they trusted that promise. With that trust, Britain financed railways, navies, and an empire across a quarter of the planet. But the pattern returned in industrial form. World War I forced Britain to borrow on a scale it had never imagined. National debt exploded.
To pay for the war, the government suspended gold convertibility and printed money. After the fighting stopped, leaders tried to rewind the clock by returning to gold at the old exchange rate, pretending nothing fundamental had changed. Everything had changed. The pound was overvalued, exports struggled, unemployment rose. Defending the currency meant high interest rates and economic pain at home. By 1931, Britain had to abandon gold again and devalue. The pound survived, but its aura of invincibility was gone. World War II finished the job. By 1945, Britain was victorious but exhausted, with debts towering over its economy. At Bretton Woods, the world quietly replaced the pound with the US dollar as the main reserve currency. In the decades that followed, Britain devalued again, suffered high inflation, and watched its empire unwind as it could no longer afford to police distant colonies. Rome, Spain, Britain. 3 different eras, 3 different technologies, the same underlying story. Overspending, heavy debts, and the slow destruction of trust in money. So what happens when the reserve currency of our own time starts to follow the same script? Today, the United States sits where those empires once sat, at the center of the world's financial system, issuing the currency everyone else holds. Since the mid-20th century, the US dollar has been the primary reserve currency, backed first by gold, then by trust in America's economy. But the pattern hasn't disappeared. It has gone digital. The US runs chronic deficits, borrows heavily, and has created trillions of new dollars through central bank policies. The numbers sound abstract, but the effects are not. Rising prices and a slow erosion of purchasing power that people feel every time they pay for food, rent, or healthcare. Abroad, more countries are testing trade in other currencies and building systems that don't rely on the dollar. Look back at this sequence. Stage 1, dominance. 2, overextension and unrealistic promises. 3, chronic deficits. 4, debased money, whether by clipped coins, floods of silver, or digital dollars. 5, inflation. 6, loss of confidence at home and abroad. 7, a reset, sometimes controlled, sometimes chaotic. We don't know exactly where the United States sits on that ladder, or what form the next reset will take. It might be a redesigned dollar, a new basket of currencies, or something built around digital and commodity-backed money. History's message is simple and uncomfortable. No empire escapes the consequences of destroying trust in its money. If you want to see the future of an empire, watch its currency. It's where the fall begins long before anyone dares to call it collapse.